Greetings, everyone, and welcome. It's Sunday once more, which means it's time for another episode of the Captain's Table. Now, there wasn't an episode of the Captain's Table last week, because between the first episode here of the fourth season of the Captain's Table 2 weeks ago, and last Sunday, there wasn't really all that much that had occurred over that week that was really worth talking about. However, I did have an experience on last Saturday night, that is somewhat worth talking about, but didn't have enough time to really get that video out on Sunday. Plus, as I've mentioned in the previous episode of the Captain's Table, I have gotten myself a new bird. Now, I don't yet have this bird at home with me. It's still at the bird store. And since I have a limited amount of time off, I want to make sure that I'm spending as much of my time off with that bird as I can. Mostly because I want it to bond with me. So to start with what happened last Saturday evening that is somewhat of a cool experience that's worth talking about. Last Saturday, I had made plans to go up to an acquaintance's house and see his new house and see his new baby. And he was pretty proud of this house. I'm kind of one of the few people he's connected with more on a personal level. So for him, it was also kind of, cool to have me come up and see his place as well. One of the things, however, that I didn't know that he had done in the last couple of years since I had seen it and really talked to him in a face-to-face was that he had gone and he'd bought himself a Tesla Model S. Now, if you don't know much about Tesla, other than it's an electric car company, the Model S is basically their, luxury sedan. It's effectively a $90,000 car plus. And this guy works at Amazon, but he doesn't make that kind of ridiculous money. He's not an executive, he's just a network engineer. So he had to bend over backwards, sell a bunch of stocks and shares, and still had to finance this car for $50,000, and it is costing him a metric fuck ton in car payments. But as he puts it, it is 100% worth it because the car is ridiculously awesome. But he wasn't just going to tell me that the car was ridiculously awesome. No, he was going to show me all of the things that this car will do. And I have to say, I have never ridden in a Tesla. I've never ridden in an electric vehicle, so this is going to be a new experience no matter how I looked at it. But I have heard about all of the things that, Tesla has in all of their various cars and all of the various car models. And to go and sit in that car and see what it has. First off, in the center console between the two seats is this gigantic freaking touchscreen. And when I say gigantic, I have a 24-inch 1080p monitor, and I'm pretty sure that screen was at a minimum that size. It might have been a 28-inch. I don't know. It was vertical, though, so it was like your standard phone screen as opposed to, landscape style. But it was still insane to see that you could just sit there and have this massive, giant screen with Google Maps built into it and ready to go. I was just floored by that. I was also floored by the fact that I had heard about its autopilot, but I hadn't ever actually seen it function and seen how it functions. And the autopilot features on this car, he just used his phone, turned the car on, and had it pull itself out of the garage so that we could get into it. And then we proceeded to drive it onto the roads and go for a ride. The acceleration in an electric car is pretty fast. The Model S will accelerate from 0 to 60 in just under 2.5 seconds. If you aren't careful, you can get whiplash. Additionally, if you're not careful, because of the speed of the acceleration and the fact that unlike other cars, it doesn't really slow down once you get to that 60 mark, it will continue accelerating at the same constant rate. You can very quickly find yourself going 90 in a 60 mile an hour zone, which we ended up doing. And just so he could show me this acceleration, we got onto the interstate, and while he couldn't bring it to a dead stop on the on-ramp because there was a person behind us, he was able to slow down to about 13 miles an hour and then promptly accelerate. And in the quarter mile of that ramp before merging onto I-90, we went from 13 miles an hour to, 90 miles an hour. So that was a pretty ridiculous amount of acceleration. And boy, you can really feel that in that car. It is just insane. As I told him, it was basically for those who want fighter pilot maneuverability and acceleration, but don't actually have a pilot's license. But going back to the autopilot, watching the autopilot drive this car really forced me to stop and think to myself, oh my god, I live in the future. Now, the car autopilot is in itself just a technology that is absolutely amazing. Just to think of all of the technological components and software that has to go into that. Aircraft have had autopilot for a very, very long time, and that autopilot has been developing itself for the better part of 30 or 40 years in order to get it to the point where the aircraft can land itself with no visibility. This car will drive itself in kind of much the same fashion, thanks to all of the sensors that it has. Now, he said that technically right now you can't use the autopilot on regular surface streets, you can only use it on the interstate. And the reason that he explained for that was, well, the system and the cameras and the sensors will recognize a red light or a stop sign, the autopilot is not yet programmed to stop at the red light or stop sign. So if you're using autopilot on the surface streets, you had better have that somebody in front of you is following the traffic laws, or there, at the very least, is somebody in front of you following the traffic laws. Because if that car doesn't stop or isn't stopped at the red light, the Tesla will simply just run the red light. Although that would certainly be a very interesting explanation for a ticket if you got pulled over. I'm sorry, officer, my car ran the red light. I didn't run the red light. The autopilot did also a fantastic job keeping the car in dead center in between the two lanes, which was amazing. It also let you know when there was another car onto the side of you. We did this on the freeway. We changed lanes. And right now, the autopilot isn't programmed to automatically change lanes as necessary. It's still a manual process by flipping on your signal. But once you flip your signal on, that tells the car's autopilot, okay, I want to change lanes. And as soon as there is an opening big enough for the car, it will slot itself in there automatically. Soon, however, according to my friend, they're coming out with an update that it will automatically change lanes based on the traffic flow, your destination, and everything. So you can effectively tell it, you can set its speed, you can tell it your destination, and it will change lanes as it deems necessary in order to get you to your destination, and even take the appropriate off-ramp. Again, living in the freaking future, man. Other than that, though, work-wise, not too much going on. The situation there is we've pretty much gotten ourselves all cut up with all of the units that we've been given to either redo or have recently vacated that need to be turned. We've got ourselves in a nice system and a setup so that we're able to get those pretty quickly knocked out while simultaneously keeping up on all our work orders. This, of course, means nothing to the office staff, who is currently in panic mode looking for, well, effectively anybody but themselves to blame for the low traffic volume. Just nobody's coming into rent right now, and as a result, there are a lot of vacant units that are open, and the ownership and corporate are not happy about that. But as long as we keep our noses down and do pretty much whatever they say, even if it's just little teeny things, since there's nothing else major going on, they really can't come back to us and blame us for any of their lack of renting. Now, on to the bird. Echo, I still don't know whether or not if it's a boy or a girl. I'm actually hoping to find out today if Echo is a boy or a girl. So then I can finally stop referring to Echo as it and can give it a him or her pronoun just for simplicity. It really does get complicated trying to figure out a neutral term that could be ambiguous for either one. Echo, however, is growing quite a bit. Now, the Pioneus can get up to, I think, about 260 grams, or about 9 ounces total. And right now, Echo is sitting at pretty damn close to that 260 top end mark. And that's the top end mark. Like, their average weight is about 245, and when we weighed Echo when I bought him at the store 3 weeks ago, when the bird was only 5 weeks old, he was already 220 grams. So at this point, yeah, the bird has gained some mass. It's cultivated mass. It's gotten quite big. Unfortunately, the last 2 weeks have not been the best kind of bonding experience. Partly because the bird is, well, still a baby, and still very much wants baby formula. Now, if you don't know exactly what that entails for a bird, effectively that is, surrogate vomit, if you will. You're creating a liquid paste, nutritious food substitute, and you have to feed them, just kind of like mama bird would do. This does help with the hand raising. It makes them significantly more hand tame at the end of the day. And if you, the owner, do it, it becomes a much more bonded experience. Unfortunately, I have no experience doing that, so I'm not doing that. The store is doing that for me, which is perfectly fine and acceptable. Where Echo being a little bit of a shit associated with that was coming into a problem was that they would feed him either right before I got there or right after I got there and, give him back, give him to hold. But then he would want to, he'd want to go fly or try to fly and fly over to the floor and just kind of explore. A very inquisitive, exploratory bird wants to see the world. And this is actually a significant problem because the birds, they have what's known as a crop. And when they're young, they use that pretty heavily. That isn't directly to their stomach. No, instead, when you feed them or they get fed in this manner, either in the wild or hand raising, that vomit or that vomit substitute, that formula, will go into the crop rather than directly into the stomach. And so that crop will inflate usually about double the size of their stomach. And so there'll just be this kind of big poofy crop on the front of them. And then that will slowly filter into the stomach over the course of a couple of hours. The problem here, and why it's so dangerous for Echo to try and fly away from me, is that if he hits that crop or that crop gets hit, it will force it back up And if that happens, there's a very high probability that he'll still be breathing, and he'll breathe it directly into his lungs and effectively drown. And that I definitely do not want. So, last weekend, Echo was not behaving, was not cooperating, and unfortunately, I had to spend most of the hour there standing by the cage with Echo in the cage rather than, on and bonding directly with me. Of course, Echo, still being a young bird, doesn't necessarily want to be petted, doesn't yet want head scratches from me. But I'm hoping that as the bird ages at this point, should be a little bit over 7 weeks at this point, getting close to 8 weeks now. I'm hoping that the bird has mellowed out a little bit. Technically, they should reach a mature enough state where they're eating on their own and they can leave the nest, if you will, at about 10 weeks. And there is another baby Pyonis in the store. It's a white-capped Pyonis instead of a blue-headed one. And the white-capped that they had is about a week older, and it seemed significantly more mellowed out at 7 weeks than mine does at 6. So I'm really hoping that that week of maturity and difference translates over to my bird, and that bird is going to be a little bit more, maybe this time, instead of just tearing apart a nutriberry, which is effectively a bird form of a granola bar, he'll actually, eat it and be comfortable, and, maybe let me pet and head scratches or, I don't mind if the bird perches on my shoulder, just as long as he behaves himself up there. And finally, to end this episode, I am now only 20 more days of work, 4 weeks left before my vacation, where I am going to go down to Texas. And I'm going to visit the USS Texas there in Houston. Gonna go then to Corpus Christi, visit the USS Lexington, so you can expect museum ship videos for both of those ships to arrive at some point on my channel. As well as, of course, some World of Warships gameplay. At the very least with the Texas, probably not the Lexington, because that's not the same Lexington that's in World of Warships, and I don't play carriers, and I don't want to play carriers. But you can expect to see wonderful video and posts for those. If you don't follow me yet on Facebook, you should, because I will be posting pictures directly from my trip there, pretty much as they happen. So I'll upload those pictures probably same day. So, if you want to see some of those photos live and see what's going on, you absolutely should follow me on Facebook there for those. And then, after that, going up to Galveston. Now, there's a couple of different things in Galveston that I have been taking a look at. There is an 1877 tall ship, one of the last ones that's still actually out to sea, that is normally there. So I think it'll be fun to get on board that. This is obviously not warships related, but still kind of fun. I probably won't do a museum ship video on that one, but definitely will be posting pictures of it. And there's a park there, the Seawolf Park, that has, according to them, one of only 3 remaining destroyer escorts left in the world. Now, I don't know if that ship has been restored enough to the point where you can actually board it and walk around it and, get like a tour of it or not, or if it is just in a, kind of in a dry dock situation. But either way, definitely will be taking pictures of that as well. And rounding out that trip, planning a stop at NASA's Houston Center before finally returning home. And then almost immediately after returning home, the very next day, hopefully, I will head up to the bird store and I will collect my new baby and bring that bird home with me. So here in the next 5 weeks, you should hopefully be hearing additional little chirps. Although, given the Pyonis's nature, you might not actually hear the bird at all. But we will see. Every bird is different. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode of the Captain's Table. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. This is Captain Rye, signing off.